As you can see by the title of today's video, how I turned 1,000 into $1 million hosting travel nurses. This is for the person exactly who is tired of that 9-to-5 job. They're going every day and they just feel stuck. This is for the person who's been trying to grow their savings account but doesn't seem to be going anywhere. This is for that person who's trying to achieve financial freedom and maybe make an extra $1,000 to $1,500 a month for passive income. If you're any of those people, you're in the right place. Now let's get into the video. So I house these travel nurses in two different ways. Some of the properties I own outright, and another way is I use a technique called rental arbitrage that's saved for another video. But I furnish these properties and I allow the nurses to move in for about 3 months at a time. I got into this because I saw that there was a gap in the industry. These nurses are traveling across the world, providing hospital services from hospital to hospital. And I know that in order to travel across the world, you need a place to live. And of course, they don't want to haul a TV and a queen size bed and a couch everywhere they go. They're gonna need to find different hosts in order to house them. And that's where I stepped in. I began to do my research and I actually saw that there was a huge gap in my particular market. There were too many nurses and not enough hosts. So I did a ton of research and voila, I became a host a couple years ago and it's been completely life-changing. And now here I am sitting on the other side of the tracks, excited to tell you all about it. One of the big attractions to hosting travel nurses outside that they pay really well is, they're very clean and they pay on time. And as a host, one of the last things that we want to worry about is somebody who's not going to pay on time and somebody who's going to tear up everything. Well, typically these travel nurses, they're working 12-hour shifts and they just want a place they can come back. They have Wi-Fi and just a really, really simple life when it comes to being a tenant, which is exactly what we want when it comes to travel nurse hosting. These travel nurses are specifically staying 3 months at a time. So after somebody moves out, it's my job as the host to make sure that vacancy is filled because the most expensive unit is the empty one. So we want to make sure that those are always filled. I'm able to find these tenants in 3 different ways. One of them being FurnishFinder.com. Think of Furnish Finder like the middleman and the host is able to connect with the tenants. The tenants are able to actually directly reach out to the host, meaning myself, and Furnish Finder essentially just plays matchmaker between the two. After Furnish Finder does its job and it plays matchmaker, then everything is done offside of the platform. So after that, I have my own lease agreement, I have my own payment platforms, and voila, everything is done. Next up is going to be Turbo Tenant. Turbo Tenant is awesome because once I make a listing on Turbo Tenant, it then blasts out to about 10 different platforms. And these are being blasted out to the 10 different platforms that are very, very popular amongst future tenants. So this is really awesome. The biggest difference between Turbo Tenant and Furnish Finder is that Furnish Finder is geared more towards traveling healthcare professionals, while Turbo Tenant is more so just for their everyday person, not necessarily looking for a furnished space, but more so just a long-term lease, typically a year at a time. The final way that I find these tenants are Facebook groups. Never underestimate social media when it comes to marketing, and it's no exception to housing. I also am in a lot of Facebook groups in my local market and I'm able to post my listing right on there, and a lot of local travel healthcare professionals are able to utilize those Facebook groups to find housing. I've found a plethora of my travel nurses and new tenants in Facebook groups, so definitely never underestimate the power of social media. Out of those 3 options, Furnish Finder is definitely my favorite because, it's in the name, Furnished Finder. These travel nurses are looking for spaces that already have everything there for them. They're not trying to, again, haul a TV and a couch around. Every space that they are specifically looking for will need to be furnished. Now, of course, Turbo Tenant, you can have things furnished as well, but out of the 3, if I had to choose, Furnish Finder is definitely the most popular. How to determine if it's actually a good area to host these travel nurses in is if there's a lot of hospitals in the area, and 9 times out of 10 in your market, you have hospitals, and that means that there's going to be travel nurses traveling to your area. Unfortunately, people will always be sick, and travel nursing has been around for a really long time to keep up with the demand in the healthcare space. And because of that, it's up to you to take advantage. One of the biggest questions I get from my mentees is, After I have someone interested in renting from me, how do I actually close them? And it's up to you to get comfortable on the phone and let your listing do the selling. After I make my listing, I take my photos and the space is looking great to finally list on the platform so that future tenants can then seek me out. Once they are able to seek me out and they send me a message, the first thing that I'm doing is getting them on the phone. A lot of times things can be lost in translation via text message, and the first thing that you need to do is get their cell phone number and get them on the phone. After you have them on the phone, you again let your listing do the selling. I equate this to a car dealership. I promise you that I'm not gonna go into a car dealership if I'm not interested in buying a car. And same thing with housing. If I'm not seeking housing in your market, I probably won't be reaching out in the first place. So use that to your advantage once you get them on the phone, and just allow yourself to kind of ease down and be comfortable when it comes to bringing them on board and closing the deal. Once I have them on the phone, the number one thing that I'm leading with is security. These are travel nurses, and you want to make sure that they feel as comfortable as possible. Again, a lot of these people are traveling solo, maybe with 2 people tops, but they're traveling across the world to most likely a city that they've never been to before. You are the first line of defense when it comes to their introduction into that new city. You want to make sure that they feel comfortable. So security is always number one. You want to make sure that either the building that they'll be living in is safe, the house that they'll be living in, the surrounding areas are safe. Make sure that you put them at ease the very second that you get them on the phone when it comes to feeling safe. Next thing I'm leading with are any amenities that they have access to during their stay, whether this is a pool that they have access to, or a gym, or any other amenities that your space has to offer. Make sure that you're leading with that, because again, these are amenities and activities that they'll have access to, which is just a bonus versus your competition that may not have it. Then I'm heading right into any attractions that may be in the nearby area that can, again, separate you from your competition. This can be restaurants, beaches, zoos, amusement parks, anything that will potentially separate you from your competition. Make sure you use that to your advantage. We've covered the safety, we've covered the amenities, we've covered the attractions in the nearby area. Of course, now that we have them at ease and they're really feeling sold at this point, I'm then heading right into any fees that may be associated. One thing about travel nurses and that I've learned over my time here is that they definitely expect fees. And I also throw in fees such as maintenance fees, parking fees, cleaning fees. Again, these are fees that are always expected from the travel nurses. So definitely don't be afraid to throw those in there because they are an expectation. To wrap up the call, I'm heading right into how to secure the space. You've put them at ease, and now it's time to close the deal. For me, I require first month rent, security deposit, and a contract lease agreement. Those are my personal requirements. Other hosts may be different, but I have found throughout my experience that that is the best for me. When collecting the payment, I use 3 main platforms that all travel nurses typically have. This is Venmo, Zelle, and Cash App. This is exactly how I'm collecting the payment, not only when they come on board, but also throughout their time when they're paying their monthly rent. I also allow credit card payments as well. It's not something that I'll lead with, but if somebody requests to pay with a credit card, I do use the Square platform. When you're going over the requirements to secure the space, it is important to note that the security deposit is definitely refundable. I ensure that I relay this to all of the future tenants. It's always refundable as long as there's no damage done to the property, and that's typically $1,000 for me. I do charge a little bit more if somebody has a pet. You need to make sure that this is clear and plain before you bring somebody on board. After you relay about the security deposit, you then need to go in to explain the next requirement, being the first month rent. For me, I found that travel nurses have no problem paying the first month rent up front. Again, this is just so they have enough grit in the game so they feel that they're locked in, which they are contractually, which leads me into my next thing is the contract lease agreement. This is a legally binding transaction. After that's signed and sealed, everything is in writing and it's signed, sealed, and delivered. This, for me, I use DocuSign. That comes electronically and they're able to pull that up right on their phone through their emails and sign it electronically, I automatically receive a notification once that's done. Now that you've relayed all the requirements, it's time to collect the payment. Of course, you can use your desired payment platform in order to collect, and voila, you got your first tenant. Congratulations. Finally, how much does it cost to actually get into hosting travel nurses? And now that we've gathered the tenants, we know that the space needs to be furnished. That's where the $1,000 comes into play when it comes to getting your foot in the door. As mentioned, one of my 2 techniques that I use is called rental arbitrage. And that is simply where you are leasing a space to run a business out of it. And the spaces that I have, it costs $1,000 to get into the game. That means that once I put down that $1,000, the space is now mine. And after that, I just have to pay monthly rent. And I have successfully been able to turn that into $1 million based on the revenue that I've collected. I started with 1, and fast forward to now I have 30 of those, which has surpassed $1 million in revenue based on the 30 units that I have. It's been nothing but a blessing, and now I'm excited to tell you guys all about it and how easily you can get into the game. Per unit or per property, my revenue is about $3,000 to $3,500, with the profits being anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000. Again, I have to subtract expenses, meaning mortgage payments or rents, but that's where we are, and that's the reason why we've been able to surpass $1 million. If I can do this, you definitely can too. Don't get discouraged, because we all have to start somewhere. Now you see how things can change in as little as 1 to 2 years. You've got this. If you found any value and you're new here, be sure to subscribe. This is exactly how you get out of the rat race and level up. I'll see you guys next week for another video.